The crystalline towers of Valoria stretched toward the purple sky like frozen lightning. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the window of his quarters, watching the alien sun set over the city. Everything here seemed designed to remind visitors that the Valorians were more advanced than humans. The buildings grew themselves from some kind of living crystal. The vehicles floated without making any sound. Even the air smelled clean in a way that felt artificial. Jake touched the wall beside him. It was smooth and slightly warm, responding to his presence by glowing softly. Back on Earth, walls were just walls. Here everything was smart, alive, connected. He wondered if the Valorians even remembered what it was like to build something with their own hands. Behind him, Ambassador Kate Holland cleared her throat. She was a short woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Nervous about tomorrow?" she asked. Jake turned and shook his head. "Just thinking. The princess is young," Kate said. "Spoiled. Don't let her get under your skin." "I won't." Kate studied him for a moment. "The Valorians have been the dominant power in this sector for 3,000 years. They've forgotten what it means to struggle. To them, we're just primitives who got lucky with faster-than-light travel." Jake nodded. He had heard it all before during the briefings. Humanity needed allies against the Crethean swarm. The insect-like Cretheans were spreading through space, consuming everything in their path. Alone, Earth's colonies would fall. With Valorian technology and support, they had a chance. "Just smile and be diplomatic," Kate said. "Let me handle the politics." The next morning, Jake put on his dress uniform and followed Kate through the palace corridors. Their escort was a tall Valorian guard whose skin glowed with soft blue patterns. The guard said nothing, just walked ahead of them with perfect posture. The throne room was even more impressive than Jake expected. The ceiling was so high he could barely see it. Light filtered through the crystal walls in rainbow colors. Hundreds of Valorians filled the room, all dressed in flowing garments that seemed to shift and change color. They all turned to watch as the human delegation entered. Emperor Thrain sat on a throne that looked like it had been carved from a single massive diamond. He was old for a Valorian. His skin patterns faded to pale silver. His eyes, though, were sharp and calculating. Beside him stood a younger Valorian female who could only be Princess Liara. She was beautiful in the way that all Valorians were beautiful. Tall and graceful, with skin that glowed in patterns of gold and purple, but there was something in her expression, a kind of smugness that made Jake think of spoiled children back home. Kate stepped forward and bowed. Jake did the same. The ambassador spoke the formal greetings in Valorian, her pronunciation perfect after months of practice. Emperor Thrain responded with equal formality, welcoming the humans to his world. Then Princess Liara stepped forward. Her skin patterns shifted to colors that Jake's briefing had told him indicated amusement. She looked directly at him, her gaze moving from his face down to his boots and back up again. "Tell me, human warrior," she said. Her voice was musical but held an edge of mockery. "Do your kind ever dare to face the universe without hiding behind metal shells? Or are you so fragile that even our palace gardens would be too harsh for your delicate frames?" Laughter rippled through the court. It was polite, restrained, but Jake heard it clearly. He felt Kate tense beside him. The ambassador had warned him this might happen. The princess had a reputation for being difficult. Jake took a breath. He could feel every eye in the room on him. The smart thing would be to bow, to laugh it off, to let Kate handle it with some diplomatic response. But something in the princess's expression bothered him. It wasn't just arrogance. "It was ignorance, Your Highness," Jake said calmly. "Would you care to test that theory?" The laughter stopped. Princess Liara's skin patterns flickered with surprise. "Test it how?" Jake gestured to his uniform. "I wear armor when I fight because it's practical. It protects me and makes me more effective. But my people didn't always have such technology. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day. We survived not because we were strong or fast or had natural weapons. We survived because we were too stubborn to die." The princess tilted her head, her patterns showing curiosity now mixed with skepticism. "Pretty words, Captain, but words are easy." "Then let me offer a demonstration," Jake said. "Tomorrow at dawn, I will walk the scorched path to the Temple of Ancient Winds, without my armor, without any technology, just as my ancestors did when they crossed the deserts and frozen wastelands of Earth." The throne room fell completely silent. Jake heard Kate inhale sharply beside him. He knew what he had just proposed. The scorched path was famous across Valoria. It was a 3-day pilgrimage across some of the harshest terrain on the planet. Valorians attempted it wearing environmental suits with climate control, radiation shielding, and emergency systems. The idea of walking it without any protection seemed insane. Emperor Thrain leaned forward. Captain Morrison, that would be extremely dangerous. The path crosses environments that would challenge even our best athletes with full equipment. I understand, Your Majesty, Jake said, but I believe it's important that the princess understands what humanity is capable of. Princess Liara's skin patterns shifted rapidly through several colors. Jake couldn't read them all, but he recognized anger, and something that might have been excitement. You think you can walk the scorched path unprotected? You'll die on the first day. Perhaps, Jake said, but I'm willing to try. The princess looked at her father. Emperor Thrain's expression was difficult to read, but after a moment he nodded slowly. Very well, Captain. If you wish to attempt this, I will not stop you. But I cannot be responsible for your safety. I understand, Princess Liara stepped forward. I will accompany you, human. Someone needs to witness your failure, and when you beg for rescue after a few hours, I want to be there to hear it. Jake met her eyes. As you wish, Your Highness. The rest of the meeting was formal and brief. Kate negotiated the basic terms of the walk while Jake stood quietly. The ambassador's expression promised a serious conversation later. When they were finally dismissed, Kate grabbed Jake's arm the moment they were out of the throne room. What were you thinking? She demanded. We're here to build an alliance, not commit suicide. I was thinking that the princess needed to learn a lesson, Jake said. And if you die teaching it? Jake shrugged. Then at least they'll know humans don't back down from a challenge. Kate shook her head. You military types are all the same. Everything is about pride and proving something. This isn't about pride, Jake said quietly. That girl in there thinks we're weak because we use technology. She thinks having advanced equipment makes us inferior. Someone needs to show her that tools don't make you weak. They make you smart. Back in his quarters, Jake looked at his armor hanging on its stand. The powered exoskeleton had saved his life more times than he could count. It made him stronger, faster, more resilient. He wasn't ashamed of using it. But he also knew that underneath the metal and circuits he was still human, and being human meant something. He spent the evening preparing. He studied maps of the scorched path, memorizing landmarks and potential dangers. He checked his basic supplies, water containers, simple rations, medical kit, navigation compass. Nothing electronic, nothing powered. Just the basics. Commander Ryan Chen stopped by late in the evening. Ryan was his second in command, a solid officer who had served with Jake for 5 years. Sir, I have to tell you this is a bad idea. Noted, Jake said, not looking up from his map. The temperature swings alone could kill you. The path crosses volcanic regions where the ground temperature exceeds 140 degrees. Then it goes through canyons where it drops below freezing. Your body won't be able to handle it. Humans evolved as persistence hunters, Jake said. We chased prey across the African savanna in 100-degree heat for hours. We crossed the Bering Strait during the Ice Age. We sailed across oceans in wooden boats. We climbed mountains that reached into the stratosphere. We're built for this. That was thousands of years ago, sir. We're not the same anymore. Jake finally looked up. Aren't we? Put a human in the wilderness with no tools and what happens? Some of them die, sure, but some of them survive. They adapt. They figure it out. That's what makes us human, Ryan sighed. Just be careful, sir. Always am. That night, Jake lay in his bed staring at the ceiling. He thought about Earth, about the old stories of exploration and survival. He thought about the first astronauts who rode primitive rockets into space, knowing they might never come back. He thought about colonists who traveled for years to reach new worlds, not knowing what they would find. Humanity had always been like this. Always pushing forward, always testing limits. It wasn't stupidity or recklessness. It was curiosity mixed with determination. It was the same drive that made a group of primates leave the trees and walk upright across dangerous grasslands. He wasn't trying to prove humans were better than Valorians. He was trying to prove that humans were human. That underneath all the technology and advancement, they still had that spark that had carried their species from caves to starships. The sun was just beginning to rise when Jake arrived at the starting point of the scorched path. The location was marked by an ancient stone arch covered in Valorian symbols. Beyond the arch stretched a vast plain of white crystal formations that glittered in the early morning light. Jake wore simple military fatigues, the kind soldiers used for training exercises. No armor, no powered systems, no advanced equipment. His pack contained water containers, basic food rations, a medical kit, and a compass. Everything else he had left behind. Ryan stood beside him, looking worried. "Last chance to change your mind, sir." Jake shook his head. "I'll see you in 3 days. If you're not back in 4, I'm coming after you." Fair enough. A Valorian transport vehicle arrived, floating silently above the ground. Princess Liara stepped out, followed by her guard captain, a stern-looking Valorian named Velkarn. The princess wore a sleek environmental suit that covered her from neck to feet. The suit was pearl white and seemed to shimmer in the light. "Good morning, Captain," she said. Her skin patterns showed what Jake guessed was amusement. "Sleep well? It might be your last comfortable night for a while." "Morning, Your Highness," Jake replied evenly. Velkarn approached with a small device. "Captain Morrison, this is an emergency beacon. If you activate it, we will extract you immediately. There is no shame in admitting defeat." Jake took the beacon and clipped it to his belt. "Understood." Another Valorian emerged from the transport carrying a small floating platform loaded with recording equipment. "For the historical record," Princess Liara explained. "When I tell this story, I want proof." Jake said nothing. He adjusted his pack, checked his water supply one last time, and stepped through the ancient arch. The scorched path stretched before him, disappearing into the distance. The first section was called the Crystal Flats. The white formations reflected sunlight in every direction, creating a glare that hurt the eyes. Jake pulled out a pair of simple sunglasses and put them on. Within minutes, he could feel the heat building. Princess Liara walked beside him, her suit maintaining a comfortable temperature inside. "Tell me, Captain, how long do you think you'll last?" "I'm guessing 2 hours before you collapse." "We'll see," Jake said, maintaining a steady pace. The heat grew worse as the sun climbed higher. The crystal formations acted like mirrors and magnifiers, bouncing light and heat from every angle. Jake felt sweat begin to soak his shirt. He adjusted his breathing, keeping it steady and controlled. "You're already sweating," the princess observed. "Doesn't that bother you?" "Sweating is how humans cool down," Jake explained. "Our bodies release water through our skin. When it evaporates, it takes heat with it. It's one of the most efficient cooling systems in nature. Seems messy. Maybe, but it works." They walked in silence for a while. Jake focused on maintaining his pace. Not too fast, not too slow. He had studied endurance techniques before coming here. The key was consistency. Don't burn too much energy early. Save strength for when you really need it. After the first hour, Princess Liara seemed surprised that he was still going. After the second hour, she started asking questions. "Why do you do this? Why prove a point through suffering?" Jake thought about how to answer. "My people have a saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. We believe that facing challenges makes us better. But why seek out challenges? Why not just use technology to avoid suffering?" "We do use technology," Jake said, "but we don't want to forget what we're capable of without it. There's a difference between choosing to use tools and needing them to survive." The princess was quiet for a moment. "You think we need our technology? I think you've had it for so long that you might have forgotten what you can do without it." By midday, the temperature had reached its peak. Jake's shirt was completely soaked with sweat. His face was red from the heat and sun exposure. He stopped at a shaded spot beneath a large crystal formation and sat down. He drank water slowly, letting his body absorb it. Princess Liara stood nearby, perfectly comfortable in her suit. "You should activate the beacon." "This is foolish," Jake shook his head. "I've been in worse." "Where? What could be worse than this?" Jake took another drink. "Basic training on Earth. They sent us into the desert for a week with minimal supplies. The goal was to teach us that we could survive on our own. Some people quit. Some people pushed through. I pushed through. Why? Because I wanted to know if I could." He stood up and started walking again. The princess followed, her expression thoughtful. As the afternoon wore on, Jake began to show more signs of stress. His pace slowed slightly. His skin darkened from sun exposure. But he kept moving forward, one step at a time. Velkarn, the guard captain, spoke for the first time in hours. "Your Highness, the human's vital signs are concerning. His core temperature is elevated and he shows signs of heat exhaustion." "I can hear you," Jake said without turning around. "I'm fine." "You don't look fine," Princess Liara said. Looking fine wasn't part of the deal. They reached the first waypoint as the sun began to set. It was a small shelter built into the side of a crystal cliff. Ancient Valorian pilgrims had used it for rest. Jake dropped his pack and sat heavily on the ground. Every muscle ached. His head pounded from the heat and exertion. Princess Liara removed her helmet now that they were in shade. "You made it through day 1. I'm impressed. But tomorrow will be worse." Jake pulled out a ration pack and ate slowly. The food was bland but provided necessary calories. He drank more water, careful not to drink too much too fast. "Tell me about Earth," the princess said suddenly. "What is it like?" Jake looked up, surprised by the question. "It's beautiful. Blue oceans, green forests, white mountains. But it's also dangerous. We have deserts where nothing grows. We have polar regions where water turns to ice. We have storms that can destroy buildings. We have animals that hunt us. Earth didn't make life easy. But you survived. We survived because we learned to adapt. When it was cold, we made fire and built shelters. When it was hot, we found shade and water. When predators hunted us, we learned to hunt back. We weren't the strongest or fastest or most dangerous species on our planet, but we were the smartest. We figured things out." Princess Liara sat down across from him. Without her helmet, he could see her skin patterns more clearly. They showed curiosity now, not mockery. Our world was never like that. Valoria has always been stable. The climate is controlled by natural systems. Dangerous predators died out millions of years ago. We evolved in comfort. That's not a bad thing, Jake said. But it means your challenges were different. You had to think bigger, reach farther. That's why you have better technology than us. But you think we've lost something. Jake was quiet for a moment. I think maybe you've forgotten that underneath all the technology, you're still biological beings. Your bodies are capable of more than you realize. You just never need to push them. The night grew cold quickly. Jake wrapped himself in a thin emergency blanket from his pack. It wasn't much, but it helped. He lay on the hard ground, his body screaming with exhaustion, and tried to sleep. Princess Liara remained in her environmental suit, which kept her warm. She watched the human warrior sleep fitfully, shivering despite his blanket. She could end this with one command. Order an extraction. Force him to admit defeat. But something stopped her. She kept thinking about what he had said. About adaptation, about not forgetting what you're capable of. The Valorian Empire had been powerful for thousands of years. They had technology that made life easy and comfortable. But when was the last time a Valorian had pushed their physical limits? When was the last time someone had done something just to prove they could? In the morning, Jake woke stiff and sore. His skin was burned despite the sunglasses and his attempts to stay shaded. His lips were cracked. But when he stood up and shouldered his pack, his eyes were determined. Ready for day 2? Princess Liara asked. Ready, Jake said. They left the shelter as dawn broke. The second section of the path was called the Thermal Canyons. The landscape changed from flat crystal plains to a maze of narrow passages between high walls. Volcanic vents created pockets of extreme heat, while shadowed areas remained freezing cold. Jake entered the first canyon and immediately felt the temperature shift. One moment he was in scorching heat that made the air shimmer. The next moment he stepped into shadow and felt cold air that made him shiver. His body struggled to adjust to the rapid changes. Princess Liara watched as Jake navigated the canyons. She noticed how he moved. When he entered a hot zone, he moved quickly to minimize exposure. When he entered a cold zone, he slowed down, giving his body time to adapt. He was constantly analyzing, thinking, adjusting his strategy. You're treating this like a battle, she observed. It is a battle, Jake said between breaths. But the enemy is the environment, not a person. And you're winning? Jake smiled slightly, though it made his cracked lips hurt. I'm still standing. That's all that matters. They continued through the canyons. Jake's suffering was obvious now. He stumbled occasionally. His breathing was labored. Sweat still poured from him in the hot zones, but in the cold zones he shivered uncontrollably. His body was being pushed to its limits, but he didn't stop. He didn't activate the beacon. He just kept moving forward. Morning came too soon for Jake. Every part of his body hurt. His muscles felt like they had been beaten with hammers. His skin was burned and cracked in places. When he tried to stand, his legs almost gave out beneath him. He grabbed the wall for support and forced himself upright. Princess Liara was already awake, watching him. You can barely stand. I'll manage, Jake said. His voice was rough and dry despite drinking water. This is insane. You've proven your point. Humans can endure. Everyone watching the recording sees that. You don't need to finish. Jake shook his head slowly. I need to finish. If I quit now, people will say I gave up. They'll say humans can endure but not succeed. I need to make it to the temple. Pride is going to kill you. Maybe, Jake admitted. But I'd rather die trying than live knowing I gave up. He checked his water supply. Lower than he liked, but enough for one more day if he was careful. He ate a ration bar, forcing down the dry food despite his throat's protest. Then he picked up his pack and started walking. The third day's path was the most dangerous. It crossed an area of active geological instability. The ground itself could shift without warning. Cracks in the earth released superheated steam. The air quality was poor, filled with volcanic gases that burned the lungs. Jake wrapped a cloth around his nose and mouth to filter some of the gases. It helped, but not much. Every breath felt like inhaling fire. His eyes watered constantly. He moved slowly, testing each step before putting his full weight down. Princess Liara followed in her environmental suit, which filtered the air perfectly. She watched Jake struggle and felt uncomfortable. Yesterday she had felt respect. Today she felt something else. Guilt? Concern? She wasn't sure. Captain Morrison, Velkarn said from behind them, I must advise immediate extraction. The toxic gas levels are approaching dangerous concentrations. Even for a human. Noted, Jake wheezed. They continued forward. The landscape around them looked like something from a nightmare. Black volcanic rock, glowing cracks in the earth, steam vents that hissed and spit. The heat was intense but different from the crystal flats. This was wet heat, thick and oppressive. Jake's pace slowed to a crawl. Each step was an effort of will. His vision blurred at the edges. He knew the signs of serious heat exhaustion, of toxic gas exposure. He was approaching his limits. But the third waypoint was only a few hours ahead. He could make it. He had to make it. Then everything changed. A deep rumbling sound came from beneath them. Jake stopped, his survival instinct screaming danger. Move, he shouted. Get to higher ground. The ground shook. A crack appeared in the volcanic rock, spreading rapidly. The Valorian hover platform carrying the recording equipment tilted and crashed. Princess Liara stumbled. Velkarn grabbed her arm, pulling her away from a spreading fissure. The shaking lasted only seconds, but it felt like forever. When it stopped, Jake checked himself for injuries. Nothing serious. He looked around for the others. Princess Liara was standing, but something was wrong. Her environmental suit had a tear along the left arm. The self-repair systems activated immediately, but Jake could see they weren't completely sealing the breach. A small section of her arm was exposed to the toxic air. Your Highness, are you hurt? Velkarn asked urgently. I'm fine, she said, but Jake heard the strain in her voice. The suit is damaged, but the repairs are holding. Jake moved closer, examining the damage. The repair systems had created a temporary seal, but it wasn't perfect. Gases were seeping through. Worse, the damaged section couldn't regulate temperature properly. In this environment, that was dangerous. How long can the suit maintain integrity? Jake asked. Velkarn checked a device on his wrist. With the damage, perhaps 12 hours at optimal efficiency. But the temperature regulation is compromised. The princess will feel discomfort. Discomfort? Princess Liara said. I already feel it. My arm burns. For the first time since starting this journey, the princess was experiencing what Jake had been experiencing all along. The bite of toxic air, the burn of heat against unprotected skin, the discomfort that came from being exposed to a hostile environment. Jake removed his outer shirt. Underneath, he wore a thin undershirt. Here, he said, tearing the outer shirt into strips. Wrap this around the damaged area. It will provide some protection and insulation. Princess Liara stared at him. You need that shirt. I'm already exposed. A little more sun won't kill me. But if those gases get into your suit, you'll have serious problems. Velkarn helped wrap the cloth around the princess's arm. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. The hover platform was destroyed, but the emergency beacon still worked. They could call for extraction right now. Do we continue? Jake asked, looking at the princess. She met his eyes. Her skin patterns showed pain and determination in equal measure. Can we reach the waypoint with my suit in this condition? Jake studied the path ahead. It's dangerous. But yes, I think so. If we move carefully. Then we continue. Velkarn looked like he wanted to argue, but one glance at the princess's expression stopped him. They moved forward, but everything had changed. Now Princess Liara understood what Jake had been dealing with from the beginning. The heat against her exposed arm was immediate and intense. The toxic gases made her eyes water and her throat burn, even with most of her suit still functioning. Every step brought new sensations of discomfort that she had never experienced before. "How do you bear this?" she asked Jake after an hour. "It's agony." "You learn to accept it," Jake said between labored breaths. "Pain is just information. It tells you something is wrong, but you don't have to let it control you. You acknowledge it and keep moving. That's impossible, is it? You're doing it right now." Princess Liara realized he was right. She was in pain, but she was still walking, still moving forward. Her body wanted to stop, wanted to curl up and wait for rescue, but her will kept her legs moving. "Tell me how," she said. "How do you push through?" Jake slowed his pace to match hers. "You break it down. Don't think about reaching the waypoint. Think about reaching that rock over there. When you get to the rock, pick the next landmark. One step at a time. One goal at a time." They walked together and Jake talked. He told her about his training, about the first time he had pushed through real pain, about learning that the human body could endure far more than the mind believed possible, about the difference between pain that meant injury and pain that was just discomfort. "Your body has limits," he explained, "but your mind usually quits long before your body does. The trick is recognizing which is which. Right now you're in pain, but you're not injured. You can keep going." Princess Liara focused on his words. She picked a landmark ahead and walked to it. Then another. Then another. The pain didn't go away, but it became something she could manage. Something she could work with instead of against. They reached an area where volcanic steam created a thick mist. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Jake stopped and pulled out his compass. He studied it for a moment, then nodded to himself. "This way," he said, leading them through the mist. Princess Liara followed close behind. In her comfortable suit, she had never needed to navigate. The suit's systems always told her where to go. But now, with the damage affecting her sensors, she had to trust the human's judgment. They emerged from the mist near a cliff edge. Jake stopped and looked around, getting his bearings. Princess Liara stood beside him, and for the first time really looked at him. His face was a mess of sunburn and cracked skin. His lips were bleeding. His eyes were bloodshot from the toxic gases. He swayed slightly from exhaustion, but his hands were steady on the compass. His eyes were focused. Despite everything his body was going through, his mind was still sharp. "You're incredible," she said quietly. Jake glanced at her, surprised. "I'm just doing what I need to do." "No," she said. "You're doing something most beings would never attempt. And you're doing it to prove a point to someone who insulted you. That's either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid." Jake smiled slightly, though it made his lips hurt worse. Maybe both. They continued along the cliff edge. The path became narrow, barely wide enough for one person. Jake went first, testing each step. Princess Liara followed, her damaged suit making balance harder than it should be. Halfway across the narrow section, she slipped. Her foot came down on loose rock that shifted. She felt herself falling backward toward the cliff edge. Jake's hand shot out and grabbed her good arm. He pulled her forward, away from the edge, but the sudden movement made him lose his own balance. They both fell forward onto the safe part of the path. Princess Liara lay there for a moment, her heart pounding. She had almost fallen. Without her suit's balance systems working properly, she would have gone over the edge, and Jake, already exhausted, had saved her without hesitation. "Thank you," she said. Jake pushed himself up slowly. "Don't mention it. No, I mean it. You could have let me fall. After everything I said to you, after how I treated you, you still saved me." Jake looked at her seriously. "Your Highness, I didn't come here to punish you or let you get hurt. I came here to show you something. Letting you fall wouldn't accomplish that. What are you trying to show me? That strength comes in different forms. Physical strength, mental strength, technological strength. They're all valid. But the most important." Jake woke to the sound of wind howling outside the shelter. His body screamed in protest as he tried to move. Every muscle was stiff. Every joint ached. His skin felt like it was on fire in some places and numb in others. He forced himself to sit up and immediately regretted it as dizziness washed over him. "Easy," Princess Liara said. She was sitting nearby, still wearing her damaged environmental suit. "You need to drink water before you try to move." Jake took the water container she offered and drank slowly. The liquid helped clear some of the fog from his mind. Outside, the wind continued to howl. It sounded angry. violent. Velkarn stood at the shelter entrance looking out at the dark sky. A storm is forming. A major one. The atmospheric sensors detected it last night, but it developed faster than predicted. Jake struggled to his feet and joined the guard captain. Beyond the shelter, the sky was a churning mass of dark clouds. Lightning flashed in the distance. The wind whipped volcanic dust into spirals that danced across the landscape. How bad? Jake asked. Severe. Wind speeds will exceed 100 kilometers per hour. Lightning strikes will be frequent. The electromagnetic interference will make communication impossible. No aircraft can safely operate in these conditions. Jake understood what that meant. They couldn't call for extraction even if they wanted to. The storm had trapped them here. How long will it last? Unknown. These storms can persist for hours or days. Princess Liara joined them at the entrance. Her skin patterns showed worry. So we wait it out? Velkarn nodded. That would be the safe choice. However, he paused, checking his instruments. Your Highness, your suit's integrity is degrading faster than anticipated. The repair systems are failing. Within 12 hours, the suit will no longer provide adequate protection. The princess touched her damaged arm. The makeshift cloth bandage Jake had given her was still wrapped around it, now stained and dirty. And if the suit fails completely? In this environment, without protection, you would have perhaps an hour before serious harm occurs. Jake studied the storm. It was bad, but he had seen worse. Earth had hurricanes, typhoons, tornadoes. Humans had learned to survive storms long before they had technology to predict or avoid them. The question was whether they could make it to the temple before the storm got worse or the princess's suit failed completely. How far to the temple? He asked. Approximately 8 kilometers, Velkarn replied. Jake did the math in his head. In good conditions, they could make that distance in 2 or 3 hours. But these weren't good conditions. The storm would slow them down. The terrain would be treacherous. And both he and the princess were already operating at their limits. We need to move, Jake said. If we wait and her suit fails, she'll be completely exposed. At least if we're moving, we're making progress towards safety. Moving in this storm is extremely dangerous, Velkarn said. The visibility will be near zero. The wind could knock you off the path. Lightning could strike. Staying is dangerous too. The princess's suit is failing. We don't have the luxury of waiting for perfect conditions. Princess Liara looked between them. It's my decision, she said firmly. Her skin patterns showed determination despite the fear underneath. We move forward. Captain Morrison is right. Waiting just makes things worse. Velkarn bowed slightly. As you command, Your Highness. But we must be cautious. The storm's electromagnetic interference has already disabled our hover technology. I cannot carry extra supplies. We must travel light, Jake checked his pack. His water was low. His food was nearly gone. But he had rope, a knife, and his compass. Basic tools, but they would have to be enough. They stepped out of the shelter into the storm. The wind hit Jake like a physical force, nearly knocking him over. He leaned into it, finding his balance. Volcanic dust stung his eyes and face. He wrapped the cloth from around his nose and mouth over his eyes instead, creating a crude protective barrier. Princess Liara stumbled in the wind. Her damaged suit couldn't compensate for the force of the gusts. Jake grabbed her arm, steadying her. Stay close, he shouted over the wind. Hold on to my pack if you need to. They started walking. The landscape that had been merely hostile before was now actively trying to kill them. The wind drove volcanic dust into every exposed surface. Lightning cracked across the sky, so bright it left after images. Thunder followed immediately, deafening. Jake pulled out his compass and checked their heading. The magnetic interference from the storm made the needle jump and spin, but he could still get a general direction. He picked a landmark barely visible through the dust and headed toward it. The wind changed direction constantly. One moment it pushed them forward. The next it tried to shove them sideways off the path. Jake learned to read the gusts, to lean into them or brace against them. Princess Liara followed his lead, learning through necessity. After an hour, Jake called a brief stop behind a large rock formation. They huddled in its shelter, catching their breath. Princess Liara's suit was showing more damage. The cloth around her arm was shredded. Her skin underneath was red and raw. How are you doing? Jake asked. I've been better, she admitted. But I'm still moving. Jake smiled despite everything. That's the spirit. Tell me something, she said. Why do humans do this? Why seek out danger and difficulty? Jake thought about it while he sipped water. Because we learn more about ourselves when we're challenged. When everything is easy, we never know what we're really capable of. But when things are hard, when we're pushed to our limits, that's when we discover our true strength. Is that why you became a soldier? Partly, I wanted to test myself, to see if I could handle the hard things, and I wanted to protect people, to make sure others didn't have to face dangers alone. Lightning struck nearby so close Jake felt the hair on his arm stand up. The thunder was instantaneous and deafening. They pressed against the rock until the aftershocks faded. We need to keep moving, Jake said. Staying in one place makes us a target for lightning. They pushed on through the storm. The hours blurred together. Walk, stumble, recover, walk again. The wind was relentless. The dust was everywhere. Jake's legs felt like they were made of lead. Each step required conscious effort. Princess Liara fell behind. Jake looked back and saw her struggling to keep up. Her suit was failing more with each passing minute. He dropped back to walk beside her, offering his arm for support. I don't think I can make it, she said, her voice barely audible over the wind. Yes, you can, Jake said firmly. You've already made it this far. You're stronger than you think. I'm not strong like you. Strength isn't about being the toughest or the fastest. It's about refusing to quit. You haven't quit. That makes you strong. They walked together, Jake half supporting the princess. Velkarn followed close behind, ready to help if either of them fell. The storm reached its peak. The wind became so strong that walking forward was nearly impossible. They had to move sideways, leaning heavily into the wind to avoid being blown over. Lightning struck all around them, turning the world into strobing flashes of light and darkness. Jake fell to his knees at one point, exhausted beyond measure. The wind howled in his ears. The dust filled his mouth and nose. Everything hurt. His body was shutting down, telling him to stop, to rest, to give up. But he thought about the princess beside him, struggling through her own pain. He thought about Ryan waiting for him at the temple. He thought about all the humans throughout history who had faced impossible situations and survived through sheer determination. He stood up. Come on, he shouted to Princess Liara. We're almost there. She looked at him with disbelief. How can you know? Jake pointed through the dust. There, barely visible through the storm, was a shape, tall, angular, carved from stone. The Temple of Ancient Winds. They had made it. The final push was the hardest. The temple was still half a kilometer away, but it felt like 100. Every step was agony. Jake's vision narrowed to a tunnel. He couldn't feel his feet anymore. His body was running on pure willpower. Princess Liara's suit gave a warning beep. Complete system failure in 5 minutes, it announced in a calm, mechanical voice. 5 minutes, Jake repeated. We can do 5 minutes, they stumbled forward. The temple grew closer. Jake could see details now. Ancient carvings. Steps leading up to an entrance. Figures waiting at the top. Come on, he urged. Almost there. Princess Liara's suit failed with a final beep. The climate control shut down. The air filtration stopped. She was suddenly exposed to the full force of the storm. She gasped as toxic air filled her lungs. Her eyes burned from the dust, but they were at the temple steps. Jake grabbed her hand and pulled her up the stairs. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. His legs gave out on the 4th step. He fell forward, his hands catching him. Princess Liara fell beside him, but they were at the top. Strong hands grabbed them, pulling them into the shelter of the temple entrance. Jake looked up through blurred vision and saw Ryan's face, worried and relieved. You made it, Ryan said, his voice choked with emotion. You crazy fool, you actually made it. Jake tried to respond but couldn't form words. His body had nothing left to give. He felt himself being lifted, carried inside. He saw Princess Liara being tended to by Valorian medical personnel. He saw Emperor Thrain standing nearby, his expression unreadable. Then darkness claimed him and Jake knew nothing more. Jake woke slowly, his mind swimming up from deep sleep. The first thing he noticed was the absence of pain. Not completely gone, but manageable. The second thing he noticed was that he wasn't alone. Princess Liara sat in a chair beside his bed. She wore simple robes instead of her environmental suit. Her skin pattern showed concern mixed with relief when she saw his eyes open. Captain Morrison, she said softly, how are you feeling? Like I got hit by a transport ship, Jake said, his voice rough. But I'll live. How are you? Recovered. Our physicians used advanced cellular regeneration on my injuries. I'm mostly healed. She held up her arm where the suit had been damaged. The skin was smooth and unmarked. They offered to use the same technology on you, but your second in command said you would refuse. Jake smiled slightly. Ryan knows me well. Humans heal slower, but we heal. I'd rather do it naturally, even though it means more pain. Sometimes the pain is part of the lesson. Princess Liara was quiet for a moment. I owe you an apology, Captain. When you arrived on Valoria, I treated you with disrespect. I mocked you and your people. I was arrogant and foolish. You were young, Jake said, and you didn't know any better. That's not an excuse. I should have known better. She stood and moved to the window. Outside, Jake could see the temple courtyard. Valorians moved about their business, and in the distance he saw the path they had walked. I grew up surrounded by technology and comfort. I never had to struggle for anything. I thought that made us superior. I thought beings who needed to struggle were weak. And now, she turned to face him. Now I understand that struggle is what makes beings strong. Not technology, not advanced society, the willingness to face difficulty and overcome it. You taught me that. I taught you by almost killing both of us? Princess Liara laughed, a sound Jake hadn't heard from her before. Yes, actually. Sometimes the best lessons are the hardest ones. She sat down again, her expression becoming serious. When my suit failed and I was fully exposed to that storm, I finally understood what you had been experiencing for 3 days. The pain, the fear, the exhaustion. And I understood something else too. What? That you chose to experience all of that. You could have worn armor. You could have used technology. But you chose not to, just to prove a point. That takes a special kind of courage, Jake shook his head. It wasn't courage. It was stubbornness. Maybe they're the same thing sometimes. The door opened and Emperor Thrain entered, followed by Ambassador Kate Holland and several Valorian officials. Jake tried to sit up straighter, but the Emperor waved him back down. Please, Captain Morrison, you need not stand on ceremony. Not after what you've accomplished. The Emperor's skin patterns showed deep respect. I watched the recordings of your journey. All of Valoria has watched them. What you did was remarkable. I just walked, Your Majesty. You did far more than walk. You showed us something we had forgotten. You reminded us that beneath all our technology, we are still biological beings capable of extraordinary things. The Emperor glanced at his daughter. And you saved my daughter's life. For that alone, I am in your debt. She saved herself, Jake said. I just gave her a little guidance, Princess Liara smiled. You're too modest, Captain. Emperor Thrain clasped his hands together. Captain Morrison, when you came to Valoria seeking an alliance, you asked us to join Earth in the fight against the Creathian swarm. I was hesitant. I questioned whether humanity had the strength and determination necessary to face such a threat. I wondered if your species would crumble when truly tested. Jake remained silent, letting the Emperor speak. You have answered those questions through action. You demonstrated that humans possess something invaluable in war, not just technological capability but unbreakable will. When a human decides to do something, obstacles become irrelevant. You simply find a way forward, no matter the cost. The Emperor nodded slowly. The Valorian Empire will join your alliance, Captain Morrison. We will stand with humanity against the Creathian swarm. Kate Holland stepped forward, her expression carefully neutral, but Jake saw the triumph in her eyes. Your Majesty, on behalf of Earth and all human colonies, we accept your alliance with gratitude and respect. The formal words were exchanged. Treaties would be signed later, with all the proper diplomatic procedures. But the important decision had been made. Humanity and the Valorian Empire would face the coming threat together. After the officials left, Kate stayed behind. She looked at Jake with a mixture of exasperation and admiration. You know, there are easier ways to conduct diplomacy. Where's the fun in that? Jake asked. Fun? You nearly died, multiple times. But it worked, Kate sighed. Yes, it worked. The Emperor was impressed. The entire Valorian population is talking about the crazy human who walked the scorched path. You've become something of a legend here. I just wanted to make a point. You made several points. About humanity's resilience, about the value of struggle, about the importance of humility. She smiled slightly. And you made us look good in the process. So thank you, even if your methods gave me several heart attacks. Over the next few days, Jake recovered slowly. Valorian physicians monitored him, amazed by the human body's ability to heal from such extreme damage. They took notes, asked questions, studied his cellular structure. For beings who had relied on technology for so long, the raw biological resilience of humans was fascinating. Jake spent time talking with Princess Liara. She was different now, more thoughtful, less certain of her own superiority. She asked him about Earth, about human history, about the struggles humanity had faced. "Tell me about your wars," she said one afternoon as they walked through the temple gardens. "Humans fight each other often, don't they?" "More than we should," Jake admitted. "We're not always good at working together. We have different beliefs, different goals. Sometimes those differences lead to conflict. But you also unite against common threats?" "Yes. When something threatens all of humanity, we find ways to cooperate. It's not always smooth, but we manage." "The Krathians threaten everyone," Princess Liara said. "Not just humans and Valorians. Other species, too. But most of them are afraid to fight back. Fear is natural when facing overwhelming odds." "Is that why humans fight? Because you're not afraid?" Jake shook his head. "We're afraid. We're terrified, actually. But we fight anyway. Fear doesn't mean you can't act. It just means you have to be brave enough to act despite the fear." Princess Liara absorbed this. "I think I'm beginning to understand humans. You're not fearless warriors. You're beings who acknowledge fear and overcome it." "That's a good way to put it." On the 5th day after reaching the temple, a formal ceremony was held. Thousands of Valorians gathered in the temple courtyard. Jake stood on a platform beside Emperor Thrain, Ambassador Kate, and Princess Liara. He wore his dress uniform, cleaned and repaired, though his face still showed the marks of his ordeal. Emperor Thrain spoke first, his voice amplified to reach the crowd. 5 days ago, Captain Jake Morrison of Earth accepted a challenge. He walked the scorched path without armor or advanced technology, relying only on his body and his will. Many of you watched the recordings. You saw him struggle. You saw him suffer. You saw him refuse to quit. The crowd was silent, listening intently. What Captain Morrison demonstrated was not just human capability, but human character. He showed us that true strength comes not from technology or physical power, but from determination and adaptability. He showed us something we Valorians had forgotten about ourselves. Emperor Thrain gestured to his daughter. Princess Liara stepped forward. Her skin patterns showed nervousness but also determination. "I challenged Captain Morrison," she said, her voice clear. "I mocked him and his people. I was wrong to do so. During our journey on the scorched path, Captain Morrison taught me that every species has value. Every being has strength. Technology is a tool, not a measure of worth. I learned more about myself in those 3 days than I had learned in 19 years of comfortable living." She turned to Jake and bowed deeply, a gesture of profound respect in Valorian culture. "Thank you, Captain Morrison, for teaching me wisdom through example." Jake bowed back. "Thank you, Your Highness, for being willing to learn." The ceremony continued with more speeches and formal declarations. The alliance between Earth and Valoria was officially announced. Plans were made for joint military operations against the Krathian swarm. Technology would be shared. Forces would be coordinated. But beyond the politics and strategy, something more important had happened. 2 species had come to understand and respect each other, not through words or treaties, but through shared struggle and mutual growth. After the ceremony, Jake stood at the edge of the temple platform, looking out over the landscape he had crossed. The scorched path stretched into the distance, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. He thought about every step he had taken, every moment of pain and doubt. Ryan joined him. "We're shipping out tomorrow, sir." "Back to the fleet. Good, I miss space." "Solid ground is overrated," Ryan laughed. "Only you would say that after what you just went through." "It wasn't all bad. I learned some things." "Like what?" Jake thought about it. "Like the fact that we're stronger than we think we are. All of us, humans, Valorians, any species. We just need to be reminded sometimes. We need to be challenged.